Take a second and listen to this for me. Do you hear that? It's silence. It's nothing there. Silence is kind of a weird thing for us, though. Silence is something that kind of makes us feel like uncomfortable, or it can be like a little unnerving sometimes. Like, have you ever been in like a small group or in class where the teacher or the leader asks you guys a question and you all just sit there in silence? No one knows what to say and it kind of gets awkward. Yeah, it happens all the time when I lead a small group. But it's one of those things where we don't like to be around silence. We like to hear sounds. We like there to be conversation, things happening. And that's how I am. I like to be moving. I like to be doing something. Like when I'm working or driving, I got to have music playing or a podcast or something playing in the background, because the silence just feels weird. It feels unnatural, almost awkward, like we said. Or you may be the type of person that has to fall asleep with some sort of sound, like music or white noise or like a whale going, just to like get yourself to fall asleep. That may be you, it's not me. But we as people sometimes have an aversion to silence. We don't like to be around it. It kind of makes us uncomfy. And King David from the Bible also felt that, especially when it came to silence from God. Maybe you felt that way before, where God felt kind of quiet, kind of distant. Maybe you guys have been talking, you're praying, you're in good conversation with Him, you're reading your Bible, but then you're praying to Him and you hear nothing. You're like, God, where are you? I'm like waiting to hear back from you. I'm waiting for you to do something in my life. I'm waiting to see something from you. But yet every single time you're calling out, you feel like you get radio silence. And David felt a little like this at one point in his life. And I'm sure he felt this way in many times in his life. But he wrote about it in Psalms 13. I'm going to read that for you right now. Let me grab my Bible real quick. This is what Psalms 13 says. It says, "O Lord, how long will you forget me? Forever? How long will you look the other way? How long must I struggle with anguish in my soul, with sorrow in my heart every day? How long will my enemy have the upper hand? Turn and answer me, O Lord God. Restore the sparkle to my eyes, or I will die. Don't let my enemies gloat, saying, 'We have defeated him.' Don't let them rejoice at my downfall. But I trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord because He is good to me." And maybe you felt like David at some point. Maybe you felt like, man, God's just not around. Things aren't going well. Maybe a family member passed away. Maybe things at home or at school just aren't going well. And you feel like God's distant. He's far away, not paying attention to me. And we see in Psalms 13, David says, "How long will you forget me? Forever?" David feels abandoned. He feels like God just doesn't care about him. He saw God show up in his life many times, especially with Goliath, right? But he's like, "God, I've been walking with you, but are you ever going to respond back? Are you ever going to text me back again?" Then he says, "How long will you look the other way?" And, at this point in time, I'm not sure what David was going through. The Bible in this section doesn't specifically say what he's going through, but he's going through it. And all we can see is that David feels abandoned by God. He feels like God doesn't care about him. And I think the first thing we understand is that God doesn't work just like a vending machine. We put $1 in, and then we know exactly what we're going to get right away. And we get that instant gratification. And it's like, hey, here's the $1. All right, my prayer's going up. All right, now I want money. I want fame. I want this. I want that. I want you to do this in my life. I want to be successful. But one thing we need to understand about our relationship with God is that our relationship with God isn't purely transactional, but it's relational. And a relationship that's reliant on Him completely and on His timing. And I think if everything were to be on my time, I don't think it would go well, because my mind works in a certain way and it focuses on me, not the bigger scheme of things, right? Because God can see everything, and I can only see this much in my life. So when I can only see so much, I think I know what's best for me in that timing, but I really don't. And I think that's why sometimes God uses silence as a way of waiting out time, of biding time until just the right moment to strike and reveal His glory in our lives. And so if we look back in the Bible, in between the Old Testament and the New Testament, there's 400 years of silence from God, where the Israelites felt silence. They didn't hear anything from God. There's nothing written about it. They don't know what's going on, and God feels distant. But if you look through history and see that 400 years of silence basically set up the coming of the king, which was Jesus. It was God's timing, waiting for just the right moment for his son to come into our lives. I also believe that God's silence works as a testing ground for us. It works as a way of seeing how we will react and respond when we feel like that radio silence is going on. When we feel like there's distance, will we choose to lean on my own abilities, on what I know and what I can do? Will I take that response of silence and lean on God and choose to continue to pour into God and move towards him rather than moving the opposite way? If we look at the story of Job, if you know that story, basically Job was a super wealthy man. He had it all, but then it was all just immediately stripped away from him. Just gone in an instant. And it was the devil's way of betting God that, hey, if I were to take away everything from your servant Job, I bet he's going to turn his back from you. Hands down, he's done. But God goes, I don't think so. I don't think that's what's going to happen. Do what you want, but don't kill him. And I'll prove to you that Job will still be faithful at the end of it. And if you read that story, amidst Job's immense suffering and pain and loss and ridicule from friends, that at the end, Job still chose God. Job still chose to be a servant of God. And he didn't waver, and his dedication for the Lord stayed true. And at the end of that, he was rewarded. His suffering came to an end, and everything that he had was restored to him like 2 times over. And so every time in my life, when I felt God was far or distant, in the moment it sucked. It's hard to picture and understand. And also I feel like in that moment, it's also hard to forget where God's come through. And it's easy to have the same reaction as King David does. And not that that's wrong. It's okay, because in this chapter, this is his way of presenting his thoughts and feelings to God. He's saying, God, I know you're there, but you feel really far away, and it really sucks. And sometimes it's hard to forget all those times that God was faithful, all those times that God was working in our lives. And it's also hard to look for the future, because in the moment, it's not fun. In the moment, it's not great. But all I can say is when I've gone through those times of silence with God, where I feel like God felt distant or he's not there, I come back on the other side and be like, whoa, God, you were there the entire time. You were moving in this situation. You were there every step of the way, just pulling the strings in the background. And sometimes it is hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But this is one thing to remember, and this is how David saw it at the end of Psalm 13. I'm going to read it one more time for you. And this is the part that I love about what David says at the end of how he finishes off this like prayer of lamenting. This is what he says. But I trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord because he is good to me. See, David remembered that God had been faithful and that he was going to be faithful again. You've done it once, you're going to do it again. And so in moments in your life where God feels so far and distant from you, where you feel like, man, where did our relationship go? Is just God on a break from me? What's going on? Just know that God is so much closer than you think. And David knows that. He sees that. He goes, I will rejoice because I know that even though right now it's not great and it feels like you're far away, I know you're still there. But man, it'd be really nice if you'd say something. If you just stop in and say hello. But just like David, Job, and the Israelites, God's always been there. He's always been sovereign. He's always been watching you and taking care of you. He's just waiting for the right time. He's just trying to see, hey, how are we going to respond to this? Am I going to choose to do what I think is best? And be like, all right, God, you know what? You haven't said anything in a bit. I'm just going to go do my own thing. Or are we going to choose to lean into the silence? Just like Job, when God felt silent during his entire time of suffering, and still pursue God's heart. And you will experience times in your life where God feels silent or God feels distant and far away from you. But what I have to say is the silence won't last forever. Like with David, with Job, and the Israelites. The silence eventually was broken. God breaks that silence and reveals his glory to us. It'll happen, I promise. But your job is to continue to love and chase after him. Not to falter or fall by the wayside, but to continue on and remember those times that he showed up before this. And remember that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that there is an end to the silence, and it will be broken, and that God will be there waiting for you. But it's your choice to follow after that. And just as he was good to David, he's going to be good to you too, I promise. And I know it feels weird to have a God that seems so far away all the time. But he's still there working in the background, and he still loves you. Thanks for watching.